Across the entire healthcare industry today, a massive and growing segment of the medical workforce is fracturing under immense, unrelenting pressure. The presentation of this distress is remarkably consistent across medical specialties. Clinicians report profound physical and emotional fatigue, creeping depersonalization toward their patients, and a paralyzing sense of ineffectiveness. When doctors and nurses report these symptoms, hospital administrators almost universally categorize the problem under a single familiar label: occupational burnout. Because of this categorization, the prescribed interventions are entirely focused on individual behavior. Clinicians are instructed to take time off, adjust their scheduling, or attend resilience training seminars like workplace yoga. Here is the clinical discrepancy. A massive and growing cohort of healthcare professionals applies these interventions, takes the prescribed rest, and returns to work without any reduction in their symptoms. If severe exhaustion cannot be cured by rest, the exhaustion is not the primary pathology. The diagnosis of simple burnout is incorrect. Treating a collapsing medical system by telling individual doctors to take a nap is a diagnostic failure. It is an error that allows the actual cause of the distress to spread unchecked through the workforce. To identify the pathology, we map shared symptoms of fatigue and anhedonia into two distinct etiologies. The environmental column is classic burnout, a situational distress tied directly to the workplace. The endogenous column represents clinical depression, a pervasive disorder impairing self-worth completely independent of location. Thousands of distressed clinicians do not meet the criteria for a primary endogenous mood disorder. Yet, unlike standard burnout, their psychological distress follows them home, persisting long after they leave the hospital. This persistent refractory distress requires a third diagnostic category. In the medical literature, it is now identified as moral injury. The distinction is precise. Burnout is an operational failure, a mechanical mismatch between the demands placed on a worker and the resources given to them. But moral injury is a relational rupture. The severe distress observed in modern medicine is rarely the result of a clinician working too hard. It occurs when the healthcare system forces that clinician to compromise their deeply held ethical oaths. This flowchart, developed by Dean, Morris, Manzor, and Talbot in 2024, maps exactly how distress cascades through a healthcare system. We will look first at the top, operational track. On the far left, we see the inputs driving daily hospital operations: limited resources, endlessness, and chaos. These inputs flow directly into chronic work stress, which the human nervous system is normally well equipped to handle. In a functional environment, clinicians use the upward path shown here to establish work boundaries. When those boundaries cannot be asserted, the chronic stress remains unrelenting, tracking straight into the final burnout node. This endpoint is reached when physiological adaptation fails. The clinician simply runs out of the physical and cognitive energy required to process the workload. This entire top track is an equation. It is a mathematical failure of human capacity versus institutional demand. Operational burnout is severely draining, but it is not inherently toxic to the psyche. Running out of resources won't violate a clinician's core professional identity. The pathology shifts from exhaustion to trauma along this single downward curving path, where unaddressed stressors cross the line into perceived betrayal. That drops the clinician into the relational track, landing on the node defined by psychiatrist Jonathan Shea. Shea defined moral injury in military veterans as a betrayal of what is right, executed by someone who holds legitimate authority in a high-stakes situation. In a civilian hospital, this exposure occurs when a professional flags an unsafe clinical constraint to an administrator and is dismissed so the hospital can protect its profit margins. From this perception of betrayal, the framework branches. The path of least institutional resistance is the upper arrow, acquiescing to the betrayal. Clinicians often take this path because they are tightly constrained. They carry massive medical school debt, they fear retaliation, or they lack viable employment alternatives. Acquiescing moves the clinician directly into the next node, defined by Brett Litz as the transgression of deeply held moral beliefs. While Shea focused on the external betrayal by an authority figure, Litz focuses on the internal response. This is the profound psychological damage of failing to prevent acts that violate your own ethical expectations. That internal transgression flows straight into the terminal note, moral injury. The injury does not occur because the system is broken. It occurs because the individual is forced to actively participate in the betrayal of their own patients just to survive within that corporatized system. To observe this mechanism in a clinical setting, we can look at the case of Dr. Ray Bravant. Dr. Bravant worked as an emergency department physician. His hospital mandated that he act as the single assigned doctor handling all inpatient resuscitations. He alerted his supervisors that this was unsafe, as multiple critical patients could arrive simultaneously. The administration, citing cost savings, refused to staff a second physician. This placed Dr. Bravant exactly at the precipice of Litz's transgression node. He was forced to choose between protecting the hospital's financial directive and protecting his patients' lives. Instead of quietly acquiescing, he chose the lower path on the framework. He actively resisted the mandate by speaking out and formally declaring the environment clinically unsafe. He was subsequently fired, which led to a lawsuit. A jury ruled in his favor, legally validating that he was defending a deeply held moral belief regarding patient safety. By explicitly refusing complicity with corporate directives, a clinician asserts their ethical limits. This action halts the cascade before the psychological damage takes root. When moral injury goes unacknowledged over years, the emotional reserves of the clinician are drained, producing severe downstream pathologies. The first is existential boredom. This is not a lack of tasks. It is a profound atrophy of personally valued meaning, triggered by years of executing endless, purely transactional demands. As that meaning evaporates, the distress can progress to passive suicidal ideation. The clinician does not necessarily form an active plan for self-harm, but develops a persistent desire to simply disappear or cease existing. These severe manifestations mimic the symptoms of endogenous depression. However, they are entirely driven by the external architecture of the healthcare system. The human brain possesses a built-in negativity bias to detect threats. When corporatized systems exploit that biology for profit, the resulting apathy is not a personal failure of resilience. It is a predictable biological response to an inescapable ethical paradox. This brings us back to the initial clinical discrepancy: why standard burnout interventions consistently fail these professionals. You cannot meditate your way out of an ethical compromise. A week of vacation does not repair a core violation of your professional identity. The healthcare retention crisis will continue until diagnostic precision forces institutions to admit systemic betrayal, rather than blaming the workforce for a lack of resilience. Future interventions must reject profit-driven operational efficiency as the ultimate metric of success. The system must be structurally recentered on ethical decision-making and optimal patient care. Accurately recognizing moral injury restores agency to the clinician. It removes the stigma of exhaustion and shifts the burden of repair from the broken individual back to the broken system.